You don't know who it's for? Then why have you brought it to the post office? Arthur walks into the Kelsy Post Office carrying a small brown parcel. John looks up at him from behind the counter. Morning, Arthur. What have you got there? Arthur places the parcel on the counter. A parcel. John smiles. I can see that. Who's it for? Arthur scratches his head. I haven't the faintest idea. For a moment, John simply stares at him. Then he blinks. You don't know who it's for? Arthur shakes his head. No. John points at the parcel. Then why have you brought it to the post office? Arthur looks perfectly serious. I was hoping you could tell me. There are some people in every village that know everything. In Kelsy, one of those people was John. John knows Arthur well enough to recognize trouble when he sees it, and he's beginning to suspect this is not going to be an ordinary morning. Arthur taps the parcel thoughtfully. I know who sent it. John folds his arms. Good. Arthur nods. I just don't know who should receive it. John frowns. That doesn't make any sense. Arthur smiles. Exactly. At that moment the door opens and George walks in. One look at Arthur is enough. Oh no. John points to the parcel. Apparently, Arthur wants to send a parcel to somebody. George shrugs. Sounds normal enough. John sighs. He doesn't know who it's for. George nods slowly. Ah. John waits. George looks at Arthur, then at the parcel, then back at John. That sounds more like it. Arthur seems pleased that somebody finally understands the situation. Daniel has been standing quietly near the notice board. Until now, he's simply been listening. Eventually, curiosity gets the better of him. What's happening? George answers immediately. Nobody knows. John nods, including Arthur. Arthur ignores them both. He's still looking at the parcel. Finally, Daniel asks the obvious question. Where did it come from? Arthur brightens. Now that's the interesting part. Everyone waits. The story is clearly on its way. George closes his eyes. Oh no, here we go. Arthur continues to study the parcel as if it might suddenly explain itself. Finally, he looks up. A few days ago, I was clearing out an old drawer. George groans quietly. I knew there'd be a story. Arthur ignores him. At the back of the drawer, I found an envelope. Daniel is immediately interested. What was in it? Arthur taps the parcel. This. John looks disappointed. I was hoping for something more exciting. Arthur smiles. Inside the parcel is an old photograph. Daniel leans forward. A family photograph? Arthur shakes his head. No, 3 men, a dog, and half a bicycle. George stares at him. Half a bicycle? Arthur nods. The other half wasn't in the photograph. George looks at John. You see what I have to put up with? John laughs. I'm beginning to. Daniel is still trying to imagine the picture. Who were the men? Arthur shrugs. No idea. Do you recognize them? No. The dog? No. The bicycle? No. George folds his arms. So let me get this straight. Arthur waits. You found a photograph? Yes. And now you've brought it to the post office? Arthur nods. Correct. George looks at Daniel. Normal day. Daniel laughs. There must be more. There is. Arthur carefully unwraps the parcel and removes the photograph. Written on the back in faded handwriting are the words, To my old friend. One day, this may make you laugh. Daniel reads the message. That's all. Arthur nods. That's all. John studies the photograph carefully. For the first time all morning, he becomes serious. Wait a minute. Everyone looks at him. John points to a building in the background. I know that place. Arthur looks surprised. You do? John nods. That's the old railway station. George squints at the picture. Are you sure? Quite sure. Arthur suddenly becomes interested. Go on. John smiles. I don't recognize the men though. Arthur's face falls. But I do know who worked at the station years ago. Arthur brightens again. George shakes his head. Of course you do. John ignores him. Daniel looks at the photograph again. There was a chap working at the old station called Harry Thompson. Do you think one of them's Harry? John shrugs. Possibly. Arthur carefully wraps the photograph and places it back in the parcel. So there is a clue after all. John nods. There might be. Arthur slides the parcel across the counter. Then I'd like to leave it with you. John looks puzzled. What am I supposed to do with it? Arthur smiles. What you always do. And what's that? Arthur points at the photograph. Find out something nobody else knows. For a moment, John says nothing. Then he laughs. I'll see what I can do. Satisfied, Arthur turns toward the door. Daniel follows. George remains where he is. He looks at John, then at the parcel, then back at Arthur. You know, most people come to the post office to buy stamps. Arthur pauses at the door. Where's the fun in that? George watches him leave. Then he turns to John. One day, he'll be the death of me. John smiles. No. George raises an eyebrow. No? John shakes his head. He keeps life interesting. George thinks about this for a moment. Then reluctantly, he nods. That's the problem. And with that, the two men look down at the mysterious parcel and wonder what story it still has to tell them. Perhaps that's what villages are for. Not always finding the answers. Sometimes just helping each other to look.